there, hey friends, Ken here, your thrifty apprentice, and welcome to the very first video in our professional gouache showdown. This will be a series of videos that are going to concentrate on professional gouache, climaxing in a ranking video. And we're kicking this series off looking at Shinhan Professional Designers Gouache. Now, very simple, straightforward branding. It says a superior blend of the finest colors. Shinhan Professional Designers Gouache for the discerning artist. Has the AP stamp of approval, so it does conform to the 4236 regulation. And there are 12 colors. 15 milliliter tubes. Nothing on the back. And the side simply lets you know that it's made in Korea. It gives their website. And let's crack open the box here and see what we have. Again, 12 15 milliliter tubes, and on the top part of the inside of the box there is a complete chart of, or list should I say, of the 72 colors that come in the gouache range. It gives the corresponding stock number and the name. So really cool. All right, let's take a look at the tube here. Pretty healthy gouache tube, really bright colors. It does have color swatching for each of the colors, contains the color number, the series, lettering, light fast, star rating, transparency rating, color name. All right, and the very back, again, the AP seal of approval, as well as the pigment numbers. So you have all of the relevant information that you would be expecting from a professional quality product. Let's see here. Caps screw off pretty easily. Of course, there's no foil covering because these are not medicine tubes by any means or stretch of the imagination. And there's more than enough paint in there to fill half pans or full pans, more than one, possibly more than 2 times. So let's go over the 12 colors we have here. Permanent yellow orange, scarlet red carmine, permanent yellow, permanent green light, viridian, turquoise blue, ultramarine light, violet, burnt sienna, ivory black, and then a permanent white. So what we want to do at this point is to pan these up, because I work from dried down gouache, and that is the experienced viewpoint that I typically review my water soluble products from. So I'm going to be panning these, allowing them to dry down, and then we will jump into swatching these and maybe doing some color mixing and things of that nature, just to see how things shake out. So it has been a few days since I panned the paints. Actually, it's been several days since I panned the paint, and I have done a few paintings with them at this particular point. Now, some of the things that I noticed when panning them up is that for the most part, the consistency was stable across the tubes. There was a bit of binder separation in the viridian as well as the burnt sienna, so I did have to take a toothpick and kind of mix those together to get them blended. Outside of that, no panning issues. Now, it has been a week or so, and I'm glad that it has been a week or a little over a week since I panned these, because as they continue to dry, I did see that there's some cracking happening and some pulling away from the side of the pan. However, I haven't had anything fall out, and I did pan them in a palette where the walls of the wells come all the way up to the top once the lid is closed, which will prevent them from falling out or mixing around inside the palette. So that's always helpful. And this particular palette has like this rubber stopping in the top to kind of help with that almost airtight seal. So it's really handy little palette to pan gouache up in. So straightforward, that's what that was. We're gonna go ahead and swatch the paints out together. And I'm gonna swatch them in this sketchbook that I'm planning to swatch all of the gouache from our little showdown in. And actually what I think I'm going to do is pre-wet these, although from the paintings I've done, I can tell you that they re-wet well without having to pre-wet them, but I'm going to go ahead and do it for the swatching. And we are just going to go ahead and get these swatched. I'm going to go straight from the pan with these because we want to test opacity. I did put down a black alcohol marker line, and I've given it time to dry. So we're just gonna see what we get swatching these mass tone here. See how transparent they reconstitute to be. Now, gouache from its tube is gonna be more opaque. Once you let it dry down, you are adding water to it, so it may not be as opaque from a dried down state as it would be using it straight from the tube. Well, that is not unless you actually buy gouache that's already in a half pan. Say like Karen Dosh sells their gouache in a half pan. I don't know many other companies that do it, in all honesty. Now, right off, the colors are really pretty. And in this form, they're pretty wet, so definitely it's gonna build opacity as it layers. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's put this viridian here. And then we'll move down to the next line to swatch the rest. So as you can see, in the state that they are now, they are pretty transparent when you put them down wet. However, they're going to opacify as they dry. I'm sure of that at this point. And I love the fact that it is beautiful colors. Very rich and pigmented. But I'm a pretty big fan of Shinhan products. I love their professional paints. I love their PWC, which is actually their actual professional paints. The Shinhan Professional that are in the blue box is actually their artist quality or student grade paint. Nonetheless, it's an amazing paint. It's really good for what it is and what it costs. Their PWC or SWC, depending on which market you buy it in, is their professional quality paint, and it's actually in my top 3 at the moment. Professional paints based on what I like. The burnt sienna is actually still pretty opaque, even when you reconstitute it from dried down form. The black is very opaque and beautiful. Beautiful color. And as you can see, we are going to get some that they're going to get darker as we layer. And I'm going to put down the white, which ironically enough, it's again pretty opaque. And you're going to get to see that in the demo coming up. So what I want to do at this point, let's go ahead and cut into a quick demo. As you know, we typically do that with our review videos. Then we'll come back and we're going to actually do a second glazing layer and some color mixing. For today's review demo, I decided on painting another animal. I am really enjoying this new subject being added to the things that I paint on a regular basis. I'm also excited to say that I'm using masking fluid, or drawing gum as it's called, for the very first time in my fine art journey. I must admit that I was nervous about it at first. I am one that normally uses an opaque white gouache or an opaque white colored pencil, a white gel pen, a white acrylic paint pen, or simply leave the white of my paper for my highlights, brights, and masking. However, today I decided I would give masking fluid a go. And I have to say, friends, I actually like it. And I mean, I like it a lot. It made it so very easy to protect my swan while I painted the water background around him. The main fear I had is that it would be difficult to remove, but it was actually the complete opposite. It rubbed right off with my finger with no problem at all. Now, I do need to let you know that this time lapse is available over in the Creation Station as a real-time tutorial for Patreon Creation Station members for the month of October. So if you aren't a part of the Patreon community and you are interested in a real-time tutorial of today's demo, along with many more, then you might want to consider that community. Links are in the video description. Now, at this point of shooting this demo, I was already pretty familiar with the way the paints performed, and I have to say that as gouache goes, this has been one of the better performing gouaches I've used. Now, turning my attention more to the demo, I have removed the masking fluid at this point, and I'm now using a mixture of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna that I mixed to make a neutral to paint in the shadows of the swan. The colors I used in the background to create the water were turquoise blue, ultramarine blue, and a mixture of both blues in viridian to create a dark teal color. I used a flat brush and horizontal strokes to create field of water. Afterwards, I used a black fine liner to divide the beak from the body. Now, I'm painting the beak with a mixture of permanent yellow and burnt sienna, creating sort of a yellow ochre. I will follow that up by adding a permanent yellow orange directly from the palette to finish the top of the beak. I will enhance my shadows a little more, being sure to use a clean damp brush afterwards to smooth any hard lines the paint might leave. With a number 1 round, I'm using black directly from the pan to finish off the color of the beak. Now, I did grab a fine liner again to put in the pupil and to add those little fine hairs around the face area. Now, with the same flat brush from before, I decided I needed to add more shadows under the swan. I know that with the animal being white and those darks, it would help it stand out more. The truth of the matter, friends, is that I had a lot of fun painting this. It was pretty exciting seeing it take shape, considering this was my first time giving painting a swan a go. I'm going to finish everything using the white gouache. I will use it to emulate feathers under the swan and up the underside of the neck. The white gouache stands out pretty well against the shadows, really helping the feel of feathers. I will also use the white gouache to create the reflection of the swan and to add a little sparkle to the water. And that will wrap this demo up, friends. Let's head into the glazing or swatching and wrapping up everything with some final thoughts. So in the background, I have taken time to go ahead and write all of the relevant information on my swatching sheet. I wrote the color numbers as well as the pigment numbers. I did notice from writing and labeling that there are 7 single pigment colors and the rest are basically 2 pigment blends, with the exception of turquoise blue being a 4 pigment blend. And we'll talk more about that in the review portion, or when I give my final thoughts. What I want to do with you now is to go ahead and glaze to see how we can build opacity. We'll put down some color for lifting test, some color for a salt test, and we'll do a color mixing. Now for the color mixing, I've decided to go with the carmine, the permanent yellow, and the ultramarine blue. That makes a pretty good triad of mix of primaries, and they're all single pigment. So we're gonna flow with that. Let's go ahead and get some glazing done. Now I'm not pre-wetting I'm going straight from the pan, to do that second glaze. And I did get a little bit too much water in that one. And we'll just take time to glaze over these. Now, the first layer did dry, and for the most part, they are, from this state, semi-opaque. They're not quite completely opaque. So these are things that you have to consider when you're deciding whether you want to dry your gouache down or whether you want to paint directly from the tube. Not bad at all. The glazing is definitely adding more opacity. That Viridian or phthalo green is actually a very pretty color. And for the turquoise to be a 4-pigment blend, it's actually a pretty color too. Now, it's also pretty opaque, which I would expect it to be because it does have 4 pigments, one of those pigments being PW6, which, if I'm not mistaken, is titanium white. So I would expect that one to be pretty opaque. Now, in this way, I will admit that the gouache is probably more like an opaque watercolor. But as you can see, these darker tones on the bottom are definitely more opaque. The cooler colors are definitely more opaque than the warmer colors. And let's finish up here with the black, which is rather very opaque. And let's see what the white is going to give us as far as more coverage is concerned. It's not bad. It's not bad. Not bad at all. All right, let's do some color mixing here. And afterwards, we'll go into doing a wrap up here. So I'm going to start with our red being carmine. Just put that down. We'll do lemon yellow for our yellow. And we'll do ultramarine blue for the blue. I am so thrilled at the way these colors look. They are so beautiful. All right. And we'll also do ultramarine blue and we'll mix it with burnt sienna for neutral. Let's put down our colors for lifting. Let's just do a nice color blend here and see what happens. We'll do orange. Let's go into yellow. Let's take that into scarlet. Let's do carmine. We might as well try turquoise in it, right? Ooh. And let's do a little viridian. Might as well put one more color on there. Let's get with the burnt sienna. And we will see how those lift off. Now I want to do a salt test. So we'll make a puddle here. I'm gonna put down, that water's a little dirty, but I'm gonna still put down a puddle here. And to that we will add yellow. Ooh, it's got a pretty flow to it. Beautiful flow in that form. Let's add purple. Those should cancel each other out and make sort of a brown. And they do. Beautiful mix. That's a pretty brown, actually. Let's go in with a little blue, ultramarine, why not? Add that into the mix. And that blue mixed into that, girl, look at how it mixed into that yellow, made that pretty green. Oh, so they're gonna, it looks like they're gonna mix pretty well. And let's throw in some carmine too, might as well. And then to that, I will add just a little water to get it all kind of blended. And then I will add some salt. And we'll see what happens. See if we get any texture or what. And now let's go in with our color mixing, and I'll start with the carmine. Oh, just re-wet so well. Look at how well they just re-wet and puddle. Love that. And we're gonna try ultramarine. We're gonna mix it with ultramarine blue, and we're gonna get a beautiful purple. Gorgeous color. Next up, we will do the carmine and a little bit of the lemon yellow. And there we have a nice orange. And last but not least, let's do the lemon yellow and some ultramarine. I want a little bit more ultramarine in that green. So you can definitely make different variations of the shade by adding one of more color than the other. Very, very pretty. Let's go with ultramarine blue and the burnt sienna, and see if we're gonna get a neutral here that we're happy with. And I would say yes. All right, friends. There we have it. I just want to do a flow test. I really do. And yes, that water is a little dirty. It's okay. Both of my wells are kind of dirty. And I'm gonna grab ultramarine. Oh, wow. That's gorgeous, the way that just burst out across that paper. Flows super well. Absolutely gorgeous. Let me go in with this. Okay, that one didn't flow as well, but still a beautiful color. Let's try going in with, yeah. So they flow really well, really nice. And of course they mix beautifully, even in the flow test. So nice, so nice, so nice. One more, let's go in with one more. Let's do the purple, the violet. That's nice as well. Okay. So that's our flow test. And I will write flow there. So here's what I'm gonna do at this point. At this point, I feel like we've kind of got a really good grasp. Swatched, we've glazed, have an opacity test, color mixing. We're gonna do the lifting when we come back for the overview of everything. We've done salt and flow. We've done a demo with them, and I've done some other paintings in the background. So I'm gonna give this time to dry, and then we'll come back and wrap the video up by giving a final overview of just everything that I feel I've learned from the paints and what my opinions are of them. All right, my friends, wrapping this up and offering you my opinion. Please keep in mind that this is strictly my opinion and it's based on my painting style, my painting experience, and how I use gouache in my painting journey. So you actually get quite a bit of paint here. You're going to get 12 tubes, 15 milliliters each, and they were all pretty full. Now, I did tell you that the top of the box is going to give you a complete color list in case you want to acquire about additional colors. The tubes were pretty full, and I did find that the consistency across the paints was pretty decent. I mean, there was a little binder separation in one too, but nothing too crazy at all. Now, the paints do come with all of the relevant information that you would be looking for in a professional quality product. And I did not find that the tubes were hard to open and or reseal with any issue. The paints panned up decently. I did put them in a pellet that would where the wells come all the way to the top, because after a couple of days of drying down, I did experience a little cracking, a little paint separation from the side of the wells, but nothing too severe, and I haven't had anything fall out. And I will say that that does partly have to do with the type of pellet. I'm not sure if it would fall out completely if it wasn't in this type of pellet, but I will say that what cracked or what pulled away was only one or two. I didn't experience that with all of them. So overall, pretty decent drying down experience. They re-wet pretty well. As I mentioned before in the video, I do believe that they do lose a bit of opacity from their dried down form due to the fact that you have to reconstitute them with the water. Then they would be more opaque coming straight from the tube. But either way, I've enjoyed using them and I didn't find too many issues with that overall. And we are going to take a little bit closer look at the opacity in just a moment. Let's grab the swatch sheet here. And some stuff is still drying, but it is what it is. Now, we swatched the paints out in order to do an opacity test. Because they're dried down, the first layer was semi-opaque. It wasn't transparent, just semi-opaque, and it did not offer as much coverage as you got when you went back with the glazing layer. Now, I did notice that the cooler colors in this set seemed to be a tad bit more opaque than the warmer colors, but overall, it wasn't like anything was transparent per se. Now, I noticed that of the 12 colors, 7 of them are single pigment. You have the remaining being dual pigment, and then turquoise blue being the only one with 4 pigments listed in it, and one of those being PW6, of course, to make it turquoise, and it also made it more opaque than the others. The most opaque ones, in my opinion, were the turquoise blue, the burnt sienna, the ivory black, and the permanent white. Overall, pretty decent pigment list, nothing too unstable. Beautiful colors, not a huge color shift at all. You do find that, you know, you get your typical drying method with gouache here. So I didn't really have any qualms with the paint. The only thing I kept saying in the back of my mind is that they probably would be a tad bit more opaque painting with them directly from the tube. The black covered really well, and the white offered decent opacity, considering how weak the white and some other gouache sets I've experienced. Now, I really do wish that the burnt sienna wasn't dual pigment. I don't understand why it had to be. And then, of course, I'm more of a PBR 7 fan than a PR 101 for burnt sienna, but either way, it's an okay color. The ultramarine blue is absolutely beautiful, and I was a huge fan of the carmine and the permanent. The thing about it is those three primaries are single pigment, and I feel like if you wanted to, you could actually pull the carmine, the permanent yellow, the ultramarine blue, the burnt sienna, the ivory black, and the permanent white out and have a mixing set that you could pretty much paint anything from. The Viridian is a pretty beautiful mixing green. However, I will say it's the only color that I noticed after glazing and drying had a bit of a sheen to it. And none of the other ones did. So that was something that I took note of. Of course, we did some color mixing. And the color mixing, in my opinion, went brilliantly. They mixed to make some really clean, bright, and beautiful secondary colors. And as you can see, there is not a huge color shift when they dry down. I'm really impressed with that. I was able to get a really decent neutral from mixing the ultramarine blue and the burnt sienna, which again lets me know that if I were to use those three primaries, add the burnt sienna, add the ivory black, add the permanent white, those would really be the only colors out of this set I needed to pretty much paint a huge range of subjects, regardless of what they may be. Now, we did a flow test, and I feel like these paints for gouache flowed amazingly. The thing about it is gouache pigments tend to be heavier than watercolor pigments, so I wasn't expecting them to flow as much as they did. But be that as it may, they performed really well in that flow test. Now, I am noticing that there's going to be a bigger color shift here, but keep in mind that the swatching and the color mixing was done pretty much in mass tone, painting directly from the pan with the paints, versus the flow test where a large amount of water was put down, and then each of the paints was diluted a lot with water as well in order to see how the wet and the wet flow would go. So I'm expecting more of a color shift here. Now we're going to do the lift test together, and I did notice that we got some granulation down here from the salt. I mixed a couple different colors together, and here we were still able to see that they mixed to make clean, beautiful colors. When they were mixed together, it also performed well as far as flowing into that wet wash as well, just like it did in the flow test. And as we can see, if you add enough pigment and water with the salt, it will give you texture for a large variety of things, from sand to foliage to even feathers. So I'm going to grab, let's see here, I'm going to grab a scrub, and we're going to wet it. And I got myself a studio towel here, and let's just go in here and see. Well, blending it all together definitely made mud, but as you can see, we're getting some decent lifting as well. I'll just go back on top of that one more time, and I'm actually rubbing super light. And that entire range of colors really did lift out of there. So you can lift those to get back to the white of the paper if you need it in or wanted to. Overall, friends, I feel like the testing phase, as far as this goes, went really well. I'm really impressed with how bright these colors are. But Shinhan, their watercolors are really bright and pigmented as well. So I really should not be surprised by this. Let's look at some things that I painted with it. Now, of course, you guys know we painted the swan in today's demo. I was actually really happy with the way that this came out. The paints have been performing super well, in my opinion, as far as the gouache go. And I would honestly have to say that up until this point, friends, it's probably my favorite gouache that I own. Now, here is the very first illustration that was actually done with the gouache. We did this in a live. Can't remember which one it was, but we did this, started it in one live, finished it in another, and turned out really well. The gouache waters down to give you a watercolor feel so that you can paint your backgrounds, you can get in shadows, you can get some really still pigmented and saturated washes when you water it down. However, with that said, it also builds and layers really well. Both of these subjects are white, And I was able to add in shadows to give white that color that it needs, to give it the opposite, to add form and roundness to what I was painting. And each subsequent layer did build. Now, although we saw that they lifted well in the lift test, I will admit that I didn't experience a lot of lifting of the previous layer when it came down to layering the gouache, building saturation. And I was able to remove water from the mixture in order to get a more opaque or a semi-thicker paint to layer with. You was able to see that from when I did the water in this particular demo, because after we let the first layer dry, we went back in with a much thicker consistency of gouache, more so from the pan versus being watered down, and it layered to give us the depth and saturation and shadows that we needed. So I was really impressed with that. And I will also have to say that I feel like the white performed really well. It lays down well against the shadows that we put in the swan. It laid down well against the shadows that we put in our Cosmo here. And then there was a third painting that I did, and it was a part of Inktober. It was day 2's prompt. Can't remember what the prompt was, but for whatever reason, I ended up painting a globe. Again, had beautiful flow, beautiful blending of the colors. They stand out to be really bright and vibrant and make the composition kind of pop, you know? Now here I did not use the white from the gouache set. I actually used bleed proof, and it worked really well with, you know, that other brand of gouache. This this Inktober, so I ended up using a lot of ink. The gouache worked really well against the ink. And what I do love about this is that, you know, when I wanted it to get thicker in cover, it did. But when I wanted to water it down enough to be thin enough to add a layer of color without covering my black lines, I was able to achieve that as well. So I would have to say that I feel like all three of these in their own way was a success. I enjoyed creating all three of them for whatever reason, and the gouache stood up across all three. And here we have several different types of paper. We have a 100% cotton, 140-pound cold press paper. We have more of 140-pound cold press cellulose student grade paper, and here we have a mixed media paper. So for the papers that I work on the most, the gouache worked really well on all of them. But gouache tends to work well on a lot of different surfaces, sort of like watercolor crayons, because they have more of a gouache effect. So friends, that was, well, I guess I'll leave these out so you can see them. That was what I painted. This has been the experience. And I have to say that overall, I was pretty impressed with the paints. I do not have many qualms or many cons, other than I will continue to reiterate, I think that they will probably be more opaque painting directly from the tube, but that's just not the way I roll. So if I had to give these paints a rating on a star scale of up to 5, I would have to give these paints a 4.5. I would. I am very impressed with this gouache. They're definitely better than any of the jelly gouache that I've ever used, and I am a huge fan of Artwell's jelly gouache, but that at the end of the day is still on the student grade spectrum, and this is a much more opaque, much more pigmented, much more bright, vibrant, and saturated paint that spreads and covers the paper, the tooth of the paper really well, blends really well, and just overall, I'm just impressed. I'm just impressed. I really, really am. So there you have it, friends. I would definitely recommend the gouache if you're looking for a good gouache. I don't know where they're going to stack up in the entire Gouache Showdown ranking, but I guess we'll have to wait until this series is over to see. With that being said, my friends, please jump in the comment section and let me know what you thought of today's video. Have you used Shinhan gouache? If you have, what do you think of it? What's been your experience? If you haven't used it, did you hear or see anything today that's, he may have sparked or piqued your interest. I would really like to know. If you're new to the channel and you haven't subscribed, please consider doing that and hit that notification bell so you know when we go live or when we upload. Friends, you can always check the video description for all of the relevant links. That includes Patreon, if you're interested, Defying Art website, and many other links to many other great things, including the most recommended product list. Now, I would love for you to sprinkle a little love, give this video a thumbs up, help get it out in front of other wonderful viewers like you. Share if you care to, because you never know who may want to see the review on this product. Thank you so much for joining me, my friends. And remember, as I tell you at the end of every single video, just keep creating.